Hey guys, this is Cat Monkey. My name is Cat, and on this channel I make fun, creepy, and sometimes cute themed cakes, and this time around I will be making a Berserk themed cake. I decided on making Conrad, who is part of the God Hand. If you know, you know. What you're seeing right now is how I make my modeling chocolate, which is what I use to sculpt the outside of the cake instead of using fondant, which is what people usually think of when they think of sculpted cakes. But yeah, I use candy melts, which are sometimes flavored, mostly vanilla or chocolate. And I mix these candy melts with corn syrup to make them more pliable. While I wait for that mixture to set, I'll start baking the actual cake. I will be making red velvet because actually for most of my cakes I choose red velvet. That is always the appropriate color that I use because, you know, the color of people's insides are usually always red. I mean, I don't exactly know what the color of his insides are because he isn't necessarily human, but I can safely say that red is very much on brand. If you've seen my videos before, welcome back. I know it's been kind of a minute since I uploaded my last video. In fact, I think I didn't even post a cake or two. It's just been so long. Life got kind of crazy and I had to take a moment to myself for some personal reasons, but everything's good. And I did take a recent trip to Japan, but I'm back now and, you know, gung-ho about getting into these cakes again. And of course, because of Japan, I was really inspired to do something anime related. And of course, Berserk is one of my favorite manga, if not my top manga of all time, and so it felt very fitting in terms of timing to make this cake. Real quick before I talk any further, if you hear me sniffling a lot, I just have to apologize. Allergy season has hit me really hard this year, ever since January, and it is now the end of May. It's just been really awful, and I keep sniffling, and sorry if it skeeves anyone out. Okay, so while I'm kind of assembling and layering the insides of this cake, I did want to go over what the God Hand is exactly. And this is kind of a favor to myself because when I was reading the manga, I was just purely going off of vibes when they first appeared because they appeared pretty early on in the volumes. And I didn't know what I was seeing, and even when they came up again during the eclipse and whatnot, I was still just I kind of get the gist of who they are, right? They're these demonic gods, but I didn't really think too deeply about it. They just seemed really cosmic and all-powerful and just very hedonist. Actually, maybe hedonistic isn't the right word, but yeah, I was just purely going off of they look really cool and creepy and this is awesome and I feel terrible, but I love it. And so I am going to read what the Wikipedia says, how it describes the God Hand, just so it kind of grounds who Conrad and the rest of the God Hand is. So the God Hand is a quinquevirate, which is a ruling group of 5 of demon-kind sovereigns who act as executors of the idea of evil's will by virtue of their desires being intrinsic to the entity. They reign over apostles as masters and are responsible for facilitating the demonic reincarnation of beherit bearers during sacrificial ceremonies. They have orchestrated many significant events that have largely affected the course of humanity and the state of the universe. Each member of the God Hand was once human and is a previous owner of the Crimson Beherit, which is that little creepy red egg necklace dude, which distinguished them as individuals destined to be reborn as the demon sovereigns they serve as. In 216-year increments, they each attained their proper forms during the festival known as the eclipse. And in the manga, or if you've seen the anime, you see Griffith turn into a member of the God Hand or Femto. I'm sure if you just told that to a random friend who has never read Berserk and who isn't into dark fantasy, they would just like, their eyes would glaze over, I'm sure. But, you know, if you're into the Hellraiser look, you're into dark fantasy, maybe some cosmic horror, definitely, and you're wanting to get away from H.P. Lovecraft because of his, you know, xenophobia cough, then the God Hand it is. All right, let's get back to cake business. You can see that I stacked my cake and I'm covering it with this modeling chocolate that looks like just giant mounds of Play-Doh, but I promise you that they are delicious. So I have to cover the entire cake in this initial like thin layer of modeling chocolate, so it kind of seals everything in and makes sure that the cake inside stays fresh. And then from there I can build out and make him actually look awesome. I do like to color block so that it maps him out. Now, he does look like a mailbox, I guess, at this point in time, but I do need to add some like appendages and his skull so that he actually looks somewhat like himself. And I decided to make those components out of Rice Krispie Treat because making those small, like his little arms out of cake is pretty much next to impossible. I guess I could do it, but it would just be so like unstable and probably just turn out to be a goopy mess. So using Rice Krispie Treats for like these small parts are pretty ideal. I do use this food safe wire. It's covered in like this paper so that there's no metal actually touching any of the Rice Krispie, and it adds stability when like sticking these components onto the actual cake. Once those are on, then I'll be able to add more modeling chocolate on top so that everything is more cohesive. Not sure if you guys follow me on Instagram or TikTok, but please do. I have the same username. It's catmucky. But you'll probably get like quicker notifications or, a faster heads up about what cakes I'm working on, because I do usually upload there before I do on YouTube, just because it's a lot faster to do it that way. And I did mention that I started with Conrad first because he's just the easiest member of the God Hand to do. I mean, he's shaped kind of low to the ground, so in terms of like cake shapes, cakes are kind of, horizontal and low to the ground. And so his body lends himself way more easily to cakes than the other four. And so I decided to go with him. He's definitely not the most popular of the members. I did have someone be like, why are you choosing him out of all of the God Hand? And it never occurred to me that people had their favorites. Obviously, like, Griffith is like, peak, like, most hated but iconic manga anime characters of all time. But I mean, that's a hard character to sculpt out of cake or chocolate. He's muscular and beautiful, and my strength is not in beauty, it's in monsters. And Conrad, he doesn't have muscles. He has like weird growths on his demonic looking turtle shell, and that's where my strengths lie. And so I thought, we're just gonna start with him and build our way up to beauty. And so hopefully, my skill set will lend itself to the more model looking characters when we get to that point. I will say I'm pretty nervous about that, but I do eventually want to make all of the God Hand characters, even if it takes years to do so or to get to that point. You see me busting out this food safe wire again, and that's because I thought I could get away with not using it, but the way his turtle shell is, they kind of end in these spikes, and they do jut out from his body at, a decent length. And I did want them to be pretty sturdy, as, a turtle shell has to be pretty sturdy. There is going to be some weight put on them. So I thought, better safe than sorry. And so that's why I decided to run this wire all the way through his body. I have to say, I'm really glad that I did this. Okay, now comes the actual fun part. Like, sculpting his head was okay. Sculpting his arms were kind of a pain in the butt, but his shell, like all the little grooves, all the little like gem like formations on his shell, that's where I can just get lost and kind of, if I had any Adderall, like I would probably be in the zone for like 3 days straight without sleep. But yeah, this is the best part about sculpting cakes, in my opinion. The final part to sculpt are all the soles that kind of line around him. So this cake is actually based off of a sculpture I saw online that is for sale somewhere. I never really looked into it. But in the anime and the manga, you can see that he kind of represents like pestilence. So he is formed by a bunch of rats. And so they could technically be rats, but I liked the look of all these souls that are around him because in the great eclipse, you can see all these souls everywhere. And so I like the look of that a little bit better, and also they're easier to sculpt. And so I decided to go in that direction. Took a minute to sculpt all these faces. I didn't make them look too perfect, but I actually liked that they looked a little more, I don't know, ghost-like, ghoul-like, rather than more human. And final step is painting. After that, we are all done and I'll show you that reveal. Okay, hi. Today is cake cutting day because I'm finally done with Conrad and it is super hot. At least my house is hot because we have so many windows and no central air. So we're gonna make this quick. I also have my Berserk shirt on. Isn't it super cute? And Conrad is, where is he? He's right here. Knife, plate, and fork. I'm gonna cut in between the squares of his shell because I know I ran wire where the little points of his shell end, and I want to make sure I don't cut where the wire runs. Okay, here we go. I'm nervous. I always hate this part. Came out so good. I'm always worried for no reason. Good layers. The bottom layer I didn't get. It's like still stuck in him. Okay, let's take a bite. Just a small little square. Cheers. And that was my Berserk cake of Conrad. As I mentioned before, that is cake 1 of 5 that I will be making because I'll be attempting to make all of the God hand baby steps. And I also want to mention that my next cake chocolate sculpture project video is not going to be Berserk. I'm going to be doing a slight detour and I'll be doing a Star Wars project instead. Sorry if that's kind of disappointing, but the Andor series just finished and I'm just riding the Star Wars wave right now. So if you didn't know, make sure to follow me on Instagram. My username is also catmilky because you probably already know that I'll be doing 2 tubes or 1/2 of 2 tubes. And so we'll be doing a chocolate sculpture of him. If that interests you, make sure to like and subscribe and stick around. Otherwise, I will be going back to the God hand eventually in the near future. So thanks again for watching. I really appreciate that you guys made it to the very end. And I will see you next time. Bye.